Today we're going to talk about art and the critic, or artists and the critics. Without critics, there couldn't be much art, or at least I like to think that way. Certainly the critic does a great deal for the artist's success, although artists don't always think so. Now, how do you feel, Miss Vivien Raynor? How do you feel about art and its, or rather criticism and its effect on the artist?
Well, it has changed a great deal since the good old days when Clement Greenberg discovered Jackson Pollock, put him on the map with 250 words, I think. I used to despise, when I used to be a painter, I despised critics, and then I became one, and now I defend myself by saying that the line of artists passing through creation is endless, and that we, as reviewers, reach in and pick out an artist from this line. So I think we are useful in that respect. There are so many artists out there now, and I think we do a job by just mentioning them.
Yes, you do, and you mention them very beautifully. Vivien Raynor had an article in the latest supplement of the New York Times, the Connecticut supplement, and it's a beauty about a photographer. And it's absolutely splendid writing, and she obviously has great admiration for the photographer.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do.
Yes. And Sal, how do you feel about the critic and the artist? I know you're the director of a gallery, and so in a way you're a critic all the time, because what you choose is what you like.
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I'm also an artist, and when I have my work in shows, I like to think that the critic perhaps can understand the work. But I enjoy what I do. I think it's basically, as Vivien has stated, it's a kind of service.
It is.
We want to mostly point out interesting work. Sometimes at exhibits there's work that's a mixture. Some things seem to be working really well. Other things just don't seem to gel. And I think just being able to point those things out helps the public perhaps to get into this particular artist's work.
Yes. Well, who do we write for? Do we write to get people to look at the pictures? Is that what we do?
Well, I feel now that my job is to keep museum curators in their jobs.
Touché. Yes, yes, I suppose.
It has become, things have changed markedly in the last few years, and it does at times look as though we are out here generating publicity. And in fact, people do write and ask me to generate interest. They don't say, will you come and review our show? Did you generate interest? And I find that a little depressing. But that's the way it is nowadays.
Yes, it's not exactly art speak, is it? It's ad speak.
Yes, it's
yes.
very like ad speak, yes.
Yes.
And, well, I guess it's just another sign of the times.
Have you ever really hated something that you've reviewed?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Now you're going to ask me for an example.
No, I'm not. I would not do that. However, I once hated a show that I was asked to review, mainly because the artist painted like everyone else he'd ever seen, one of each, and he had a very, very fancy signature, which I detest. And so I chose not to review it at all. Have you ever done that?
No, because I don't know who were you working for? Were you working for a newspaper or magazine? Or?
No, I was working for a small newspaper, and I could do that. It was at the opening of a new commercial gallery, and I felt it would be unfair to the owner of the new commercial gallery to do it. And that's why I did that. That's why I refused to review it.
Actually, you remind me of something. I did refuse. I did say that this was not my cup of tea, and so I was going to skip it. But and it got me into a great deal of trouble.
Yes. Well, you had the mighty New York Times as your boss.
Yeah, it was frowned upon, and it's not supposed to dismiss something without giving reasons for it.
Yes.
And I felt that if I had given the reasons, that this painter would have simply gone off and killed herself. I mean, just
Yes.
the plain facts.
Well, there is that, yes, yes. Although a bad review can often generate a lot of interest, don't you feel?
Yes.
You've put on how many shows now at the Atrium Gallery?
Oh, it's probably
Lost
been
count.
about 135, 140.
Yes, yes.
It keeps going. Yeah, it's true. I mean, everybody says, look, no matter what, as long as you can get notice, it's just the fact that someone is going to write about it. At least
the
take a
notice.
look. I mean, that's important.
Get
Yes.
the names spelled
The
right.
worst thing is when nobody notices, it's not mentioned. It's like an event. It's like a wedding that nobody came to. It's like an event that was a non-event.
Yes.
And I think that's always sad for institutions that hold the exhibits, and also certainly for the artists.
For the artist,
Yeah.
yes. The review is really terribly important.
Yeah, it is.
And I suppose even a bad review, an artist can get
bad
over.
reviews bring in more people than good reviews.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Especially
yes.
if they are impassioned.
Yes.
Yeah, they're really rude. I mean,
Yes.
people are going to go, who the hell does she think she is?
Yes, and go and see, go and find out. Yes, I quite agree. Well, I had a most embarrassing experience once. It was a small family gallery. It was an art association. And somebody had gone in there and painted two very, very pornographic paintings. These were it was a juried show, and there they were on the wall. And I looked at them, and I thought, this cannot be. And so I called the director, or the president, I guess it was, and he wasn't there, but his second in command was. And I said, you juried the show, you passed on these pictures, do you know what they are? And she said, well, yes, I think so. I can look at a picture as well as anyone else. And I told her what they were, and she said, well, she hadn't noticed that. And she called me back after a while, and she said, well, they had just had in Chicago a great fuss about censorship. Apparently Mayor Washington had been portrayed in somebody's undies, and so it had been taken off and caused a great ruckus, and she felt that the paintings should remain where they are, and if she hadn't noticed that they were pornographic, nobody else would. Well, of course, I couldn't let this go, so I didn't exactly say they were pornographic. I said I didn't think they had a place there, and they had the biggest crowd they've had in years.
Well, pornography certainly is in the eye of the beholder. There was a show closed
No.
down in New Canaan, which was closed because of alleged pornography, and I went up to look at it. And I thought, since I came from out of Sodom and Gomorrah, that I ought to know pornography when I saw it. They were just bad life drawings, as far as I could tell.
Yes.
So it is a very subjective thing.
I suppose so. Well, this lady thought it was an exploding tree. Well, I think now we're going to show a little of what the artist feels about reviewers. And fortunately, these people have both been reviewed very well. So we're going to show another what we call a B-roll of an interview I held with Maureen McCabe and Tim McDowell about a week ago, and at which point
This
I asked...
program is about artists and critics, particularly about critics or art reviewers, as some people prefer to call them. But we wouldn't have any art reviewers or any critics if we didn't have any artists. So we have asked Maureen McCabe, who is herself a very fine artist and also teaches art. She's a professor of art at the Connecticut College, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. Maureen, what do you teach at the college?
I teach foundation art courses, and I teach advanced drawing and collage and mixed media, and I used to teach women in modern art, and I have been teaching for 22 years at Connecticut College. So.
And you have found time to do your assemblages. Maureen doesn't do conventional art. She does those wonderful little boxes which come already framed, that delightful little things that hardly anyone can resist. They are so evocative. They bring the past into the present, and they mean so much, and not only to the viewer but to Maureen herself. We will see a few of these later, but first of all I want to ask Maureen, how she feels about reviewers. I know she's been reviewed a great many times. She's had a great many shows. How do you feel about reviewers?
Well, when you asked me to go into this program, I thought, well, it's hard to receive criticism. And I think the critical reviews that one receives really depends on a couple of issues. One is if you're having a solo exhibition and you get reviewed, that in general has a lot more meaning than if you're part of an exhibition and the reviewer really is picking up on a theme on the exhibition. The second part is, to me anyway, it depends, my reaction, good or bad, really depends on the person making the criticism. I looked up criticism. Criticism, the art of evaluating or analyzing with knowledge and propriety, especially works of art, the act of passing judgment as to the merits of anything. Well, if someone's going to pass judgment on me, I want to know that they are qualified in their field, as I feel I am in mine.
That's a very valid point.
I would say that I am my harshest critic, and I feel most quality artists are. I wanted to be an artist since I was 6 years old, so I have a lot at stake if I fail here. I think someone like Albert Pinkham Ryder, in an idea about him that was said, is permutation never troubled him. As he neared the end of his life, he said of Macbeth and the Witches, one of his paintings, on which he had worked for 20 years, I think the sky is getting interesting. I think what that says about an artist is that, and Ryder's one of my favorite, you always have to be self-critical. And I feel that I am an artist that is that. The most important thing that's ever been said to me about my work happened 3 years ago at Connecticut College. I can't use it in any kind of resume because it was said directly to my face. But it was said by George Kubler, professor of art history.
At Connecticut College?
No, at Yale.
Oh.
A very, very well-respected art historian. And he said, you are an artist of consequence. To me, that's the most important thing that's ever been said about me. You have critics on your program that have reviewed me, and one of which is my friend, Sal Scalora. You also have Vivien, whom I've never met. Vivien's been reviewing my work for over 15 years. Here's a quote Vivien said about my work. This is a personal cosmos with not a hair out of place.
But that's lovely.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Well, that's charming. Were you not delighted?
Oh, yeah. Oh, she hit it right on the mark. Vivien's, in my opinion, Vivien hits it on the mark quite often. I think that she's not afraid to be critical, and
She knows her art.
Well, sometimes. Sometimes. I think I've had lots of things said about me. Another quote that I have is, one needs to spend a great deal of time with her work. They are not quick studies. They are staggering in detail and charged with magnetism, magic, and mystery. Flawlessly executed. They make me think of great ballet, where it all looks so easy. I particularly like this one. This was by Virginia Mann-Hagen in 1978 when we did the Connecticut Painting, Drawing, and Sculpture Show, and this was from the catalog. One of the reasons I like this is I used to dance for 15 years, and great ballet is one of the greatest visual experiences of my life. And I remember when I was 11, I went to Boston for the premiere of Nureyev and saw him do his 4 leaps that made history. And that was a long time ago.
But is that why all your world's a stage when you're painting?
I think that I'm an artist that likes to stay indoors. and I'm an artist of the mind. I'm not an artist that receives, I'm not an artist that's really involved with contemporary life. And I feel much more at home visually in, say, the 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. I have some problems with the just visual everyday life in America. I think that our standards, our visual standards of what we accept, they lack something for me.
They're falling somewhat, yes. Well, I remember your series on Irish graves, grave sites. I found that absolutely fascinating. And I think you've had some splendid reviews. Haven't you had any bad ones?
The one thing that I would say in terms of, no, I really haven't had any bad ones. I've had ones that have said, I've always done 2 types of work, naturally maybe like 3 types of work. People know me for my slates and my narratives, and I've always done well on those. I do another type of work, which are the boxes, which are composed, and I have, because of my own visual training, at times perhaps overly composed. Composition is very important to me, and I look at that in work, and if the work isn't well composed, it always lacks something to me. But there is a danger in having too much knowledge, and you have to let go of that knowledge and go beyond it to be able to produce a really fine work of art. And I think that I'm a very well-trained artist. I mean, I've been in art school my entire life. I go to art museums, I see things, and so my quality level for myself and for my own looking is very high, but sometimes that gets in the way of your own freedom, your own visual freedom, and that would be mentioned.
But you don't need a review to inspire you. You are inspired from your inner self.
Oh, right. I mean, you know, as I said right from the beginning, when one talks about critics, sometimes the most honest type of thing you can get is from somebody that has no training. Little kids love my stuff. I learn more from them in terms of their visual reaction than I would from somebody that's kind of half-trained. I find people that are kind of half-trained in looking at art the most dangerous, because they think they know what they're looking at, but they really don't. If you want to do this seriously, this is what, you know, your life should be about too.
Well, there are actually very few critics in the world. Compared to the number of artists, or would-be artists, there is an enormous lack of critics. And I don't know what persuades people to go in for art reviews, because certainly the pay isn't enormous. But I think it's a fascinating field. I did it myself for a while, and I loved it. And but I found that I was an absolute coward about a show I didn't like. I preferred not to review it at all, which may be the way some people feel. But I think you've been not only lucky, but you've deserved it. Yours is very fine work, and we're very glad to have it. Now may we see some of it?
Certainly, Pamela.
In studio, where we're going to see the pieces she has described to us, or others have described in their words. Maureen, let us...
Why don't we, before we do this, I'd like to have my dove on TV, because animals are inspirations to artists. These are my pet doves, which I've had for over 18 years. They fly every day. And my students gave them to me because of Matisse, and that my students didn't ever want me to forget them. And they're the same doves that Matisse painted. And this one's Baby, and this one's Tagus, and this is the female, and this is the male. And my students are now 38 years old with children, and they can't believe these doves are still alive.
And have the doves had children?
Yes, they have.
Ah, I'm glad to hear it.
Several sets.
I'm glad to hear it. Now, shall we show a few of your boxes, your assemblages? we will have perhaps a little difficulty because of the glass. There may be reflection problems, but I think the viewer can see them.
The name of this piece is Coyote. It's an assemblage. And the name of this piece is Hedy, all about Hedy Lamarr. And now we have Voodoo, inspired by friends who gave Maureen little pieces from Haiti, little baubles to ward off the evil eye. And she's made an assemblage of them. It's a rather interesting picture. And this is the back of the painting, which has everything that Maureen learned about voodoo.
And this is Tim McDowell, professor of art at Connecticut College, where he teaches printmaking and drawing. He himself draws, but I don't know how much printmaking he does for himself. He does perfectly beautiful work in caustic, which is hot wax with pigment. Very difficult technique, but he has mastered it. He's had some lovely shows, and we are at present standing in front of 3 of his latest works. You will see that he shows a great deal, does a great deal of symbolism, and has a beautiful sense of color as well as technique. Now, Tim's shows have been reviewed many times. He shows all over the country. Tell me, Tim, how do you feel about reviewers? Have they influenced your work at all?
Well, I think directly, no. I've never had the luxury of being reviewed by Robert Hughes or someone who I would feel maybe would talk to me over a period of time, maybe find out, how I work, what I'm doing, look at the show.
I'm not sure that many of them do more than look at the show.
Right, I'm not sure many of them even want to.
No, right.
But,
yes.
Anyway, I think most times I've been reviewed, it's basically been a rundown, a literal translation of the visual. In other words, the reviewer or critic describes the work, how it's done, maybe avoids any issue of uncertainty and only sticks to maybe the concrete facts.
Yes, which is more review than critique.
Right, exactly.
I would say. Still, I wonder if it is a real critique. It can be very helpful if the critic is having a bad day or happens to prefer some other kind of art.
Right, right. And that's fine. I don't think as artists I take that personally. I think the criticism that I maybe listen to mostly is that from peers, other artists.
Yes.
And I think maybe the critic and the article or the film or whatever, I think it's mostly for other viewers, right? So that there's a forum for them to discuss
or to
talk
attract
about the
them
work.
to look at the show.
Exactly.
That is another point. Which has been your favorite review?
I don't think I have one that stands out in memory. Most of them have been larger group shows, and some of the comments have been surprisingly insightful, and for the reviewer not to have talked to me or talked to me about the work and then hit a nail on the head is sometimes surprising. It makes me think that maybe my intentions are being read exactly how I'm presenting.
Well, that's what you would hope.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So sometimes a painting you know, it's like a note in a bottle. You never know who's going to find it or look at it, and you never know what their reaction is. So when it's the same as yours in making a piece, then you're surprised and pleasantly so.
Yes, I should think so. Well, you don't seem to be particularly affected one way or another, which is pretty good. I think you keep on working. And I gather your style has changed a little over the years.
Oh, it's changed drastically, and I'm sure that would be a point of criticism. But you know, it's you know, I do what I do, and.
But it certainly was not as a result of reviews.
No, certainly not.
Favorable or otherwise.
Right. I know several artists have actually been criticized for changing, and maybe that's due to their public liking exactly what they were doing before, and not maybe understanding the reason for the change. And I know with certain historic characters, they come under fire for doing such.
Well, on the other hand, a great many artists have come under fire for doing the same thing all the time. Just finding
That's true, right.
something
Stuck in
and
the
running
rut.
with it. Yes. I remember somebody in Brazil actually. There had been a great fire in a marketplace. The market was sort of over the water on stilts, and it made a wonderful picture. And after a while, it was on behind everybody's couch on the wall, because I think he did it in every possible color to go with the couch, and he never got away from that. And we lost a good artist because of that. But these are some very interesting things. Now, this is symbolized. It looks from here like an overflowing cup, but it isn't. There's a wonderful scroll in there.
Yes, well, that's actually the title of the piece. This is Garden, and the one beside you is Pearl. Basically, they're part of a series that's dealing with a continuum of some formalities. The ellipses are moving through the plane. There's a layering, an underlying drawing, evidence of other painting existing below what seems to be on the top surface.
And you get that effect actually with the wax, don't
yeah,
you?
it's lovely. It has a transparency and allows that to happen very easily.
And can be carved too. I see. And this is a triptych. This basically. Would you sell them separately?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually call them a triptych. I mean, they're part of a set, and I don't necessarily mean for them to hang next to each other in a gallery, but I find it easier to work in series. Now, whether that series always gets exhibited, as a set, that depends on the place and time and etc. But I find it's very easy to work that way, to continue one idea over to the next panel.
Yes. Well, it sounds like a very good way to do it. It's certainly your way. Very successful. Well, let's see what the critics have to say about it.
Okay.
We have been joined by Bethe Dufresne of the New London Day, arts editor, and we were saying a minute ago that we really don't know the difference between an arts writer, which Bethe claims she is, and a critic and a reviewer, and are they the same thing? Are they different? I'll throw it open to you, to Bethe Dufresne, Vivien Raynor of the New York Times, and Sal Scalora, director of the Atrium Gallery and curator of the Atrium Gallery at the University of Connecticut. What do you feel you are?
Well, I would call myself an arts writer primarily, not a critic. At times I have achieved that distinction on certain occasions, but I don't think in general, I'm more an arts writer and a reviewer. I think there's a difference, a definite difference, and I think there's room in newspapers for both. Both reviews and criticism, for instance. I think they're on different levels. Obviously, to be a critic, I think you have to be a lot more educated. Vivien gave a very good distinction between reviews and criticism a moment ago. We should probably go to that.
Yes, may we have that?
No, well, it's like either you call it luncheon or you call it dinner, and one has a lifted finger, a touch of the lifted finger to it, and it's very hard. I could not write about art without offering an opinion. I mean, just to report on an exhibition, I suppose that's what a reviewer is. So I guess we have delusions of being critics. because we feel we have to come up with an opinion. It's pretty boring just to list what's in a show without
Yes.
saying
No,
this
I
is
think an
terrific
opinion
or this
is
stinks.
necessary, yes.
I would
And-
say that an opinion can even come into play in a review. I think the difference is somehow the level of it. I mean, I've written things that I would call reviews, and yet they still have an opinion. And in fact, I think there's even some opinion in my arts writing, in what I choose to write about and how I choose to express it. So I would agree with you that I think it's very boring, you know, not to have an opinion, and I think in that kind of writing it should come out. But criticism, again, I think there are far many more reviewers and writers than there are critics.
I think I know
Real critics.
what you're after here. I mean, criticism does bespeak a certain amount of thought, maybe even research.
Yes.
And few people writing for newspapers have the time and opportunity to do the research that is called for. We're all working on deadlines. You know, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I don't like the title very much because I feel like I would fall short. You know, I cover my rear end by calling myself an art writer or a reviewer.
How about you, Sal?
Well, I think what I do, you know, is also being an art reviewer, but I mean, there is opinion, you know, I think
Yes,
in
of
some
course.
cases very strong opinion. I don't usually do talking to the artist ahead of time. I do ask for their statements or factual information, but I think I do try to deal more so with what we see in front of us in that exhibit, and also how I can help to lead someone through there who maybe is someone who wants to go to art exhibits, but maybe doesn't quite have all of the tools they may need to understand this work. Again, I think there's that kind of service idea to
Yes, I
deal
think
with the
that's
artist and
important,
then
yes.
try to have the public get closer to that work.
Yes, and begin collecting.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we have on the walls behind us 4 paintings that I'd like you to give a quick opinion on. All these paintings were done by artists who have passed through the Griffis Art Center as artists in residence. There is over there behind Miss Dufresne, or Mrs. Dufresne, a picture by Mark Wagner, and then behind Vivien Raynor, a picture by Anne Seelbach, and over here, behind Sal Scalora, Matthias Marum's haunted face, and behind me, Chris Zong's fairly traditional picture of one of the lost or almost lost tribes of China. How would you like to look at these, or would you like to give a quick opinion on which one? I think that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Well, I'm particularly drawn to Matthias' painting.
You like that?
That's a quick perusal. That's immediately what I'm drawn to. And it's interesting, I did not know that was by him when I came in here
Yes.
today. And yet, years ago, I did a story when he was in residence, and it was his work that intrigued me most of all. So in a way, I feel sort of comforted that
He's here.
that there's a continuity, in my opinion, I suppose, because I liked him very much before. I think, you know, obviously he's integrated elements of abstract and portraiture, and his placement, I can see the blues and the emotional impact of that is just tremendous. I can't say immediately everything that I think that painting is about, but I know I want to know what's going on behind those eyes.
Yes.
And it makes a very powerful statement to me. Again, I would have to take a little while to articulate exactly what that was. I'm just seeing it for the first time. But
Yes, it takes a while to study that one, but I like it. I liked it the minute I saw it, and actually I bought it.
I didn't know that, for the record. I didn't know that.
Vivien, would you like to give us an opinion on one of these pictures?
One of them?
Yes, you can give. Mark Wagner was interested in American Indians. He lived with them for a while, and his whole being was tied up in the legends and the myths of the American Indians. I'm not quite sure. I think it was the Lakota tribe, but that doesn't mean very much to me.
Well, my first take on it was Russia.
Yes, yes.
So it's interesting that that's where it comes from. It is. I don't want any one of these paintings.
Right, understood.
But there are points of interest, and this is certainly very well drawn. It does have a great deal of energy. That is the one I would put out on the hill to die.
Oh, yes.
Because I don't know, it seems dishonest to me.
Well, actually, he was in China these many years as he grew up there. He came here, I think, when he was already in his 30s. And one of the things he was doing was wandering around the country and photographing all these many tribes, and I think there's something like 58, and trying to save the culture, because obviously pretty soon they'll all be in those little blue padded uniforms, tunic and trousers. And these are the trappings of authority, I suppose, and the funny pipes and such that they use. And so in a way, he's doing a great service to his country.
Yes, I realize that. I mean, the dishonesty, it just is. The sentimentality is perhaps the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
It is so posed. It is so photographic. It doesn't make me concerned for the lost tribes.
Of course, yes. Well, I'm amused that you say it is so photographic, because your latest review was about photography, and you're evidently very fond of photography, but not in painting. I see that.
Photography, the effect of photography on painting is a huge subject, and some artists have handled it very well, but somehow it seems to get in the way. I think I do see this as a photographic picture, and we have all the ethnic trappings here, and it doesn't move me at all. This I find much more interesting, and this, the abstraction. No, it just seems terribly derivative.
Yes, she was into rusting iron, all those things. She used to drive along some of the New Jersey highways, and she'd see these rusted hunks of equipment and such, and that struck her, struck a note, a response in her. And this is the sort of thing she did for a long time. She's now into ships and ships' keels and the defense industry and such.
It's interesting that you are able to supply background for each one of these paintings, and the minute you supply the background, then I back off, because you have, it becomes a little interesting. In a way, it is an excuse. I try in my job to concentrate on what something looks like.
Yes, yes.
And if I say something kind or unkind, that is immediately mitigated by, well, this person has two heads, or...
That's an interesting subject.
No, it's
How
true.
much you should know about the artist.
Exactly, you're quite right.
I have to say, I think at first, when I go to a show, I don't really want to know anything, really. I don't even want to read anything
No,
about
the
the
story
artist.
behind the show is a pain in the neck.
Exactly.
Yes.
If you set yourself up ahead of time, then you may have all kinds of preset ideas about what you should expect, and I always just like to go and see the work.
Yes, I think you're quite right.
And mill around and see it. And later, it's only later, in fact, maybe when I'm away from the show, that I'd like to read some of that and get a little background.
Well, I think I'm let us say, a little bit on the defensive, because I'm on the board of trustees of the Griffis Art Center, and I think they're doing such a terrific job, so excuse me. I wasn't really being perhaps rational as you are.
Well, but I can't speak for you, but maybe I shouldn't even be here.
Yes, you should. Oh, Vivien, your articles are so marvelous. As such examples of writing, good writing.
This is wonderful. I haven't had attention like this, and the last letter I got was what, 04 or 05, I think. No, we don't get much. We don't get much feedback.
I don't suppose so, but then on the other hand, you protect yourselves from that, don't you? A bit?
I give what?
You protect yourselves from
Somebody
feedback.
tried to sue me for
Yes.
an adverse review. I think he had been inspired by the whole Jeff Koons controversy, the
Yes.
postcode of the people with the puppies. And this person showed at Silvermine, and it so happened that he had done something that a lot of other artists were doing, and I was wondering what was going on out there. And instead of saying, this painting seems to be. I said, it is a rip-off of another painter. And then I get a letter from the brother of the lawyer.
Oh, yes.
So if that idea catches on, readers, newspaper readers are in deep trouble. If they can't, I mean, the criticism in newspapers at least represents some kind of opinion or maybe deviation from.
Well, it's implied because it's a review that it is an opinion. So obviously, I would think that would be taken care of by the fact that it was a review.
Yes, but it's in a public place, and I suppose
Yes, I should have said scenes. That's why there are so many scenes.
And alleged, a great many allegedlys in all stories of crime. And Sal, if you were to review one of these paintings, and now you know too much about them, I'm afraid, which would you choose to?
Well, again, I do like this portrait behind me. There's something of the psychological drama that's implied there. And also, I think this image here is quite interesting. There's a sort of wonderful illustrational quality to it. It seems to be about illustrating some myth, some story, perhaps. You know, there's a nice use of the paint and so forth. I mean, it's highly decorative also.
It is,
It has
isn't
that
it?
kind
Yes.
of characteristic. It's pulling in from quilt motifs and other things. But I think it implies that magic, that sense of nature and magic and goddess kind of influence also. And I think it succeeds in its own
This is
arena.
where your heart is. I mean, in your own exhibitions you have.
Yeah, I tend to go
Your
for this
interest
more
lines.
spiritual base, you know. But I don't like the fluff too much. And it can get tricky, I think, in there too, you know. When it's too new agey looking, it can get a little soft, I think, a little cute.
Maybe you can fill me in. What is this new age? And it seems to me there have been quite a few of them. And what it characterizes the current new age?
Oh, you know,
Does
I
anyone
don't know.
know?
You mean in art or just in general?
Well, it's a term that's being bandied around, and it's like the baby boomers. You see, I'm not clear on the baby boomers either. And,
Well, they've almost gone now, anyway.
Please.
You can't be called a baby anymore.
Well, I'm thinking about new age music and things like that, which you all have probably heard about. It seems
wasn't
to
there a
be that-
new age about 10 years ago?
Oh, yes, there's always a new age, and I
Yeah.
suppose it comes along every
It's so
10
funny. It
years or
seems
so.
to be a return back to another time, actually. You know, that the whole idea of the new age is a return back to some mythical natural state long ago.
Yes,
When
yes.
crystals could heal you and bells would have a very magical tone to them, and peace and quiet tranquility seem to work.
Yes. Well, yeah, and the new age in dancing, the hip-hop, for example, strikes me as absolutely
Well, heavens,
appalling.
that goes back at least 10 years, 15 years.
The hip-hop does?
Yes, the
Well,
hip.
why have I only just heard of it in the last few months?
Rap singing goes back to the late 70s. I just don't, I can't get into these. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, talk anyway.
You know, going back to something we were talking about.
Yes, Sal is pretty much into these things. Come on, Sal, tell us about the new age.
Well, he's tapping into adolescence over there.
Well, actually, you know, I'm not actually into new age, but more kind of sounding this whole idea of bringing other cultures into our view of what art is. I've been very interested in work by African Americans, by Hispanic artists, Asian artists. I think, you know, many of them have not had an opportunity to show in the past. Quality was always a word that many curators and, you know, gallery directors use to ostracize these people.
Yes.
I find a lot of their work is very interesting. So I'm looking toward the exotic. I have a tendency to like the exotic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You recently did a show, Vivien told me, on Haitian symbolism and voodoo
Oh, the voodoo
artifacts. and
flags,
such.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, you know, it's very interesting. I just want to point this out sometimes, that it's very tricky to be a curator and do exhibits that have to do with areas outside of your own culture. I'm not Haitian. And no matter how well-intentioned you may be about what you want to do with that exhibit, to highlight a culture, to be positive, to be reaffirming, to point out a political injustice perhaps, sometimes the people in that culture, Haitians, may not see that at all. They may see that the exhibit is a defamation to Haitian culture, in fact.
Yes.
Yes,
So
that's what happened.
How
It's
people,
men that
how
I-
people wish to be seen is very
Yes.
different than how people are
People
shown
want
or
PR
exhibited.
now.
Yes, but you...
Everybody wants to protect that, and I understand it. There's a lot of anger and frustration sometimes when people in certain cultures see that their images are being used in certain ways.
Did you have any fallout of that type from that exhibit?
I did actually, and it happened in Brooklyn, New York at Medgar Evers College, all-black school, and I thought, wow, what a great opportunity,
Yes.
because there's 500,000 Haitians that live there, and I thought,
Really?
wow, this is incredible, wonderful.
Oh.
But when the exhibit was starting to be installed there was an outcry by the Haitian students, and they said that they did not like many of the images. It became a censorship issue. They, some of the images showed a Haitian ceremony, which is the festival to Ogun, where people get possessed and go in the mud. They said, well, people are going to see that, and they're going to think that Haitians wallow in the mud.
It's galloping wholesomeness is what we're suffering from. It's have a nice day. The whole everyone wants to be living in a pristine shopping mall. You know, whether they are or not. It's just ridiculous.
Well, what you said, though, brings up something, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, I personally feel that some explanation is very useful with
Absolutely.
an exhibit. I mean, I actually like that, perhaps more than the rest of you.
I agree with you totally.
I mean,
You've
when
got
I
to
come in,
educate. You've got to educate.
I mean, first, obviously, I look at the work. First, I come
Right.
in and I see what am I drawn to, and I try to look at it that way. But then I'm very interested in the process. I'm very interested in where the artist is coming from. And if, in fact, after learning about the artist, where they came from and what they're trying to do, I change my mind a little, I don't feel too bad about that. I think that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, too, in this instance, I knew that there was going to probably be a lot of people really trying to figure out, well, what's this curator trying to do? What's he saying about Haiti? To back it up, I did a 64-page catalog with essays by 12 people.
Oh, my.
And I kept saying, don't look at the photographs only. Look at the 64-page
Read it,
catalog.
yes.
And after you read it, if you still think that this is blasphemy to Haitian culture, let me know. But, I think that some people only are interested in that. Well, let's just look at the art. I don't want to think about it. I don't even want to read the caption, that kind of thing. And I think it can be a problem sometimes. I think this will continue to be a problem, the whole issue of who curates a certain cultural type of theme. I mean, it'd be wonderful if a Haitian curator had curated that show. It would make sense. I've done exhibits on the Mexican Day of the Dead. I'm not Mexican, again.
Oh, yes.
I've tried to show it in an incredibly positive light. But again, I'm learning more and more that it can be tricky. It can be very tricky. People are watching, people are looking, and they're very eager to be presented in a certain light.
But do you think it is not, does not have to do with people watching too much television, so everyone wants to be presented in the best possible light? I mean, the Haitians have suffered unbelievable horrors
Absolutely.
under the Tonton Macoute. Are we not to talk about that anymore? The best photograph in that show was the row of Tonton Macoute in their suits,
In their
the
suits.
white shirt, their red
With the
ties,
sunglasses.
and their shades, a row of them on
On some kind of platform, I remember, yeah.
it's the most frightening group of people I've ever laid eyes on.
Well,
on
it
a
has-
bright, sunny
Terrifying.
day.
Sure.
Are we not to talk about this? Are we
Exactly.
to
I
say,
kept
have a
saying-
nice day?
Vivien,
Talk
I'll
about
tell you how bad the situation got is that we had a meeting with the students who actually came to the University of Connecticut before the exhibit was installed, and we put a stop to everything to discuss, negotiate. And it got so bad that one student, quite earnestly though, he wasn't being offensive, he said, how do we know that these are Haitians wallowing in the mud? And I just said, I
good
can't
question.
believe that you
Yes.
would think that we would pose actors. I said, don't you understand? This happens in your culture. But I said, I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not Haitian, but I'm not ashamed of it. I see it as very positive. And we've tried to explain voodoo as a positive, issue. And if you think that people are just going to see it and see that voodoo is to wallow in the mud, I said, that's such a negative thought, and it has more to do with your own, perhaps, feelings than what the photograph is doing.
You've
But
had
that
voodoo
level of
practitioners
distrust
there.
is amazing. The level of distrust can be amazing.
Yes, it is.
That's why I agree, you have to have education. You have to try to back things up. I don't believe in throwing exhibits up and just saying, here, enjoy.
Yeah.
I like to have broadsheets. If we can, we have a catalog. No matter what, labels, introductions.
Yes.
Something that so someone can take
I
something.
just wanted to get rid of the word education because that has such horrible connotations now, boring connotations. It's not possible somehow to explain things simply and inform people. The minute I hear educational, I begin to panic.
Yes.
Because so many abominations are committed in the name of education. So many unspeakable essays are written. So much tedium. I really do panic. Is there not some way of lowering the volume of this, that you put on a show like that? I had my criticism to make of that show.
Sure.
I didn't trust many of those photographers, but I was attempting to infer from the pictures and having some idea of how it was Lewis Hine who said the camera doesn't lie, but a lot of liars take photographs. And, is it not possible to help people to think, to use their own minds? Do we have to pound education into them? Am I making myself
I work at a
terrible?
college, and therefore, I live in a place that's really all about education. But the other issue, for instance, with this show, and it comes up in many art shows, is that it's art, but it's also anthropology, it's sociology.
Well, yes.
It's revealing a culture, and therefore you get into all of these issues, I think. It's not just a photograph, it's a specific photograph about a specific event and culture and time. And there, I think, is where it gets a little tricky. And this whole issue of representation is what comes up.
Well, I hope you didn't show anything, any evil
I
eye
have to tell you,
items.
Oh, I know
What
all
about
about
the
the evil eye.
settlement? Yeah.
I know all about the evil eye. But the settlement of the whole issue was that I finally decided that I felt bad that they interpreted many parts of the exhibit to be this way. But I said, I don't think you can isolate one photograph or two photographs and say, remove those and the exhibit's fine. I said, the exhibit is constructed in a certain way. If we remove any part of it, we destroy the whole thing. And I said, you either have to take the entire exhibit as is or don't have it at all. I also said, why don't you have your protest part of the exhibit? No, seriously, I said, and let's have the college provide you a space where you can provide alternative visions of Haitians, painting, crafts, other photographs. Let's have this event not shut down the exhibit where nobody can see any of the exhibit, but let's have it really be a great event. Let's discuss it, let's argue, but let's do it in an open context.
I wish we had some
And
footage
that's
of
what
this
happened,
exhibit.
which I think was good. And the night of the opening was very tense because everything was covered with brown paper. But it worked out okay, and there were 7 or 8 policemen there. It was a tension in the air.
Yes.
But what was wonderful was older Haitians in the community came up to speak, and every one of them said, you students don't know Haiti. You have to go there because maybe you just don't understand. This is how we have to live sometimes.
Yes.
So
But
it
you
did
say-
turn out well.
Yeah, there were 500,000
There are approximately 500,000
in-
Haitians who live in Brooklyn.
in
It's a very
Brooklyn,
large
in
community.
Brooklyn. That's
It seems
extraordinary.
to be a sizable Haitian community in Norwalk. I've just
Oh, really?
That's
I was
true.
there the other
I've
day.
heard that too. I don't know
Norwalk
how that
Technical
happened.
College
Yeah.
is
And around Stanford.
And they've all come through Miami. But we're getting a little farther away, a little
Yeah,
too
that's
far
right.
away from art.
Let's come
I wish
back.
we had some footage on that.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it, but I do want to thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us here today. I wish we had another hour or so. It would be just such fun to discuss it. But we've been, I think, very lucky to have you here, and thank you very much for joining
Thank
us
you.
on
Thank
Art
you.
Talk.